Thanks very much, Mr. Litvinov, and thanks very much, Daria, for the very nice introduction. I try to understand a little bit. However, I am not that good in that. Yes, what I searched is actually, this is actually my book, what I would like to talk about a little bit, the Business Model Navigator. And I found actually, I think you better can read it than I do. That is I think the Russian version of it. I just get a few always of different yes, of different translations. I just get sent a few. And what I would like is actually talk a bit about what is a business model innovation and how could that affect, and why I think it might be really important for you in the Ukraine. And I just try to start, if that's all right. So I would like towards business model innovation, ways to create and capture value for the Ukraine. And I think, you know, we are, when Alexandra, when you approached me, I thought really we get so much about the news, and we thought, you know, how could we do something? And I was very much engaged by doing so, because I think you absolutely need to create new business. And if I just think of that, I think there's so much to do. And for me, there are two principal ways how to do a thing. And I think this both, the one is a top-down Marshall Plan. And I think that is something what nations should do. And the other is bottom-up startups. And I think both is good, the top-down and the bottom-up. And I always think, what can we do in our circle of influence? And in our circle of influence, I think we just can build business. I have a few connections with Ukraine. I'm the board of the only Swiss company which is manufacturing, actually in Malyn, is manufacturing transformer boards. That's actually here, that's transformer boards and actually components for electrical isolation in transformers. And I think this is the thing to do. Actually, we had been under huge pressure to close operations. We kept everything open. I think we are the only Swiss company which is fully there and didn't reduce. And we still try to do so, despite it's getting more and more difficult for us. So it's kind of one thing, what I have the background to the Ukraine. The second is I'm also on the board of an IT company called Zülke. You can put that slide here. Zülke, oops, Zülke, right? It's kind of the UE. That's a company with 2,000 employees worldwide in software engineering and systems engineering. I'm vice president of that company, Zülke. So it's kind of my side job. I think I have a kind of my main university job, but then I actually also have started actually 3 companies. In 2 I'm still in, and this company Zülke I'm since 16 years in the board of. So I think I have a bit of a practical background. What I also could of, it's not just theory and research, but I also think of what could we do and how could startups actually be built. And as I learned, you did the startup course. And so lean startup methodology, I think these thoughts actually, yeah, you are familiar with that. And I think especially if I look to Odessa, because I did also some research, I think this is something, you know, where IT business has certainly actually is really a great place. So what we did, we opened at Zülke now also in Asia and Singapore, Hong Kong, Vietnam, new locations. And I think also a place like Odessa, if it's kind of peaceful again, I think that would be also really a great place, because I saw that you have a lot of technology knowledge, especially in the startup environment. We actually have here also a venture board where we invest, especially in the medtech area. So medical area, this is actually where we are also investing with our own venture fund. So besides actually engineering, we also do investing. And yeah, what I would like to start actually is kind of how can these physical and the ID world, how can that be bridged? And I think if we start off a physical thing like a heating is always a heating, and I'm sorry, this is not my special. This is my I think most convincing example. If you have actually a heating is a physical thing, and a heating can be improved. So if you add sensor on that, actually, that is the Google Nest sensor. Actually, you can improve the heating and you get actually a better physical customer value, right? And that could be finished by that one. But if you add, why did Google buy Nest, right? The sensor Nest, why did they buy it? Google was not interested in improving heating. That is not that's not the strategic mission of Google. Google is interested because that heating, so it means Nest means whenever you are here, the heating goes on, and if you're not here, the heating goes down. So typically the US, they have more this blown in hot heating, so it's kind of a different than just the water heated. But what they did is, if you add then connectivity, if you add certain kind of analytics, you check actually when you're present, when you're not present, then you could actually offer digital services. And most important is the customer value of a physical thing will always be kind of the physical customer value, and the digital service might be actually a digital value. This one is actually pretty local, right? This one is a local value. Sorry about my writing. This is a local writing, and this could be a global thing. And what Google is interested is certainly here. They want to know, are you in the room? Are you not in the room? And what does it mean? And could I connect something? Could I connect it with some digital device in the room? Could I build in services, for example, neighborhood intrusion surveillance, for example, that for intrusion or things, or just simply follow you into your house, because that's why Google started automotive driving, and that's why actually they started actually also to go into this Google sensor. So that is my main message, and this is the core of IoT. So what we are doing is actually at my institute, we are heavily doing research since 12 years for Bosch. Bosch, the company which is in automotive, but also in home active. And we build on what could you do with technology, because this actually became right now a commodity. Right, sensor technology is quite of commodity. Connectivity and analytics get kind of a commodity. So we have a lot of things like if you just think analytics, what OpenAI did just in the very last weeks with the ChatGPT 3 release, is actually a huge improvement. What happens? But most important is actually what do you do over there, kind of, because that creates additional value. And here, while this physical value is very easy, let's improve heating. Okay, if I have more data, I can better prove, when the heating is on, when do I have to put it off, how it can save a bit more energy. But this one is actually something we don't know, and we just need to experiment. And I think, especially if you look right now, analytics, this is a very young area. So this was actually the Alexander, the AlexNet from your name, kind of from the University of Toronto. That was actually in the year 2012. That was the first deep neural network developed, this convolutional neural network from visual pixel recognition. It was the very first designed with a superior performance. And I think that's why the whole area in IT-based and analytics-based is actually at the very early start. And this is where I think coming back also, especially to Ukraine, where I think there's a huge potential there. If we have basic IT knowledge, actually, because this is location independent, companies like us, like Zirke, we build actually IT centers. We started at the beginning with locations. Right now, we are even expanding that. I said, wherever there is a stable infrastructure, which is important, obviously. We actually start and get into the development, and more of the open AI initiatives shows that this is having a tremendous improvement. So if you really just think of what happened with the GDP3 version, there was actually tremendous in terms of the technical improvement. And if you overall check what the Open AI initiative actually doing, this is actually a huge advance. And I think more and more, we just need to understand how to apply it, because the language is getting on a higher and higher level. But if we do so and have more analytics, there's at the end the question of the business model. So I have here the example of a laser cutting machine of a company called Trumpf. That's Trumpf. And this laser cutting machine stands at the location of Audi. So this is in the factory of Audi, the German car manufacturer. And they actually have this machine, which is totally IoT enabled, which means it can do remote parameterization, system optimization, can do remote diagnostic, can do remote optimization, just everything. So that would be the perfect example for perfect Industry 4.0 machine, which is actually totally IoT enabled. However, they built a firewall, so they didn't allow Trumpf to directly access and monitor the machine. And that means the whole potential of IoT actually is not used. So what are they doing then? What are they doing? They actually built a firewall and said, whenever we have a problem, Audi, we just put our data into a database. Trumpf is analyzing the data. And once you have solved the problem, just bring it back to our thing. But we do not allow you real-time monitoring and real-time management, which would be the full potential. Why? Because of the business model, Why? Because Audi is in competitor with BMW, the other German strong car manufacturer, and they hate each other and are in a very fierce competition. So whenever Trumpf delivers to Audi and to BMW, so they just say, we don't want that Audi is learning that Trumpf is actually learning from Audi, from how we optimize our process, how we do actually the whole job for management, because that is something what Trumpf could learn and then later on could transfer to BMW. That's why it is crucial, with having all the technology, actually to understand about the business model, because technology is getting more and more kind of a commodity in more and more areas. And that's why I think the business model, and the business model for my Harvard colleagues, I had 2016, a half year, I was teaching at the Harvard Business School. They call a business model the story how to create and capture value. Well, for me, it's kind of a too simplified way. I think it's the American way of telling a simple story, create and capture value. For us, it's kind of more an engineering approach. For us, a business model is the integrated answer to the 4 questions. Who is the target customer? What do we offer to the customer? How is the value proposition created? And why is it profitable, the value? So in other words, it's the target market, it's the value proposition, it's the supply chain architecture and the revenue model. And the integrated answer to that is actually a business model. And if you think a little bit how we could manipulate or change kind of the business model, we said if we have more than 2 axes at the same, we change 2 at the same, then we talk about business model innovation. However, it's just a definition kind of thing. So don't worry. The most important is we have to do it holistically. If you do it only in terms of the what, then maybe it's important. It's kind of the marketing perspective. If you're only here, we are more supply chain and logistics. If you're only here, we're more maybe trying to manipulate the financial model, subscription model, and so on. But to do it in an integrated way, that is, I think, the new thing. why it took so much off. And it was Alex Osterwalder, the very first, by the way, also a Gallen person, who started the whole thinking. And we did it a bit more systematic and did a bit more research in that. And we have been inspired actually by our research on that, by the TRIS methodology, which is systematic methodological in the mechanical engineering, how you kind of a methodology, how you do design rules. And we just looked into empirically 250, at the moment even 350 business model revolutions, and thought about what are the simple patterns behind that. Now, before we go to the patterns, I would just like you to come with a simple example out of our region. For example, the business model of Hilti. Now, Hilti is a thrilling hammer, I think one of the best thrilling hammers, what you could have on the construction side. And they just had a great product in the 40s, and they built that, and they're extremely successful and have direct sales. So they started in the 20 years ago with a business model, which is called not just product with services in addition, but product as a service. So here you no longer buy a product, you get all those products, but you have it as a fleet, and means Hilti guarantees you the availability of enough construction tools on the construction site. So they say, instead of outperforming and product features, this is extremely strong, we just say we have a fleet of Hilti tools. We manage your tools so you can manage your business. Similar like in industrial manufacturing processes, the kind of C parts. Because for a customer construction company like this one, it's only 2% of the whole value is actually done by Hilti products, even if they would add anchors and all the other stuff. So it's only 2%. And if it's 2%, that's why they say actually it's a non-important thing. So you guarantee us, we supply you everything, including, by the way, theft, or if there is kind of a broken tool, Hilti just replace it, and there's just the average flat rate what they have to pay. So it's actually simplified. The very new one, actually, they even did one step further on. So that tool company Hilti is right now, did in the year 2000, started with product as a service. Today, 50% of the whole turnover, and are right now since the 2020, actually jumping in even the next step, which is even going beyond. We say we tag actually every product of our customer. So kind of every machine get a badge on it, and everything we just put a badge on it. So we do kind of inventory management for our customer. So that means we are even deeper inside. So every construction asset is actually getting to the tool. Big advantage. Obviously, also the competitive products are also be on the badge. So if a salesperson come to the customer, they exactly know, hey, these guys has 10 Makita tools and have 20 Bosch tools. So they get that all and try to and get it. And in addition, actually, the kind of lock-in effect, what happened already here, the lock-in, which means you can't be easily replaced. If here a Makita is coming, a Makita competitor product is coming, or a Bosch, maybe it's a cheap, maybe you buy 20, you get a cheap deal, you do that. Here you have a very strong lock-in effect, because it's kind of a flat rate, and they typically goes for 36 months, right? 36 months, they offer it. So what you have to do, obviously, you have to pre-finance it. Hilti has pre-financing the whole thing, but then actually they have the tools, and they only have actually simplified paying system, and get it only a flat rate. And obviously, Hilti promised to the customer, you actually need less tools, because typically you have too many tools, because some are always broken, some are you have the wrong tools. And if you do our fleet management, you actually need less tools, so you save money. And obviously, we get much more market share and we capture actually a lot of value. So for Hilti, highly profitable, and the customer save up to 40%, costs is the delta of what they save for the customer. I'm not sure whether they save fully 40%, but it has to be that successful. So they save at least something. So I guess maybe it's 15-20% in reality, and the maximum seems like 40%. What they save actually because they optimize actually the product, because normally construction sites are very unorganized. And I just think I took that example because I thought, that might be a business which might be interesting actually also for you in future, because a lot of construction actually will be there. And that's the next step. Here, I'm not sure whether this is successful. So this one certainly worked very well. When they started in the software, that means actually they kind of built a SAP system, inventory system. And I'm not sure whether it's already too far from the core competences, but we'll see whether this gets successful or not gets not successful. I'm not sure. Certainly they try to even increase the lock-in effect, because once you take kind of every tool of the customer, you are even deeper in it. Yeah, and that is why they did it, because construction companies have a lot of chaos, and that is maybe not a Swiss construction site. They are very clean, but typically, you have a lot of mess on the construction site, and by offering that one means actually the company knows better which tool is actually in which status, in which place. This is something what's in industrial manufacturing already standard, and that is something what could be actually positive. And they actually did a market research with 400 customers in Central Europe and North America, and they came out that actually at the moment the customers, the construction companies, they label the tools very little. So the kind of labeling mostly actually very little is actually really done with barcode. So kind of a bit more sophisticated. Most is actually just they engrave it and put a number on it, but then you don't know. It's a stupid tool, so it has no intelligence. And the asset management, they also found out that this is actually very lousy. So and very few kind of paper-based, Excel-based, and a lot are also not systematic. So that's why Hilti came up actually to that and to that business model, which is called On Track. If you want to check it out, the On Track business model. All right, so that's kind of what it is, and it's most important is actually if we link the physical assets to the digital world, it's about the customer value. What do we offer? And it's one, simplify the life of the customer or save costs. And certainly saving costs is always important and is actually always helping. And I think if you're zooming out right now after this deep dive example, by the way, there's actually also a Harvard Business Review case on that one, what I wrote together with a Harvard colleague on that Hilti fleet management. So there's actually kind of it's kind of also kind of good documented. Ecosystem evolve around customer journey. That is actually from McKinsey. That is the McKinsey 2018 actually citation to add that. And they actually said things will coming more and more together into ecosystem. So for example, the whole mobility area, there will be kind of a mobility as a service, and everything would be more sophisticated and coming together. Why? Because we have more and more interoperability. We have more and more platforms which take actually value and take that away. For us, it means business models become more important. With the Business Model Navigator, we have a very practical tool. Step number one actually means the initiation. That's what we teach in our executive MBA. This is actually the week number one in our executive MBA class, analyzing the ecosystem, checking out actually who are today's actor in your business, and what are the change driver which could change actually the environment of your business and could give a new answer to the who is the customer, what is the value proposition, how is the value proposition implemented, and why is it profitable, the value perspective. So that means first, get your today's business model. Second, generate new ideas. And here we have this 55 patterns, which are kind of Lego bricks, how you can build together your business model. So this is kind of proven concepts which are practically proven to be successful. And examples for that one is, you see kind of login here. I hope you can see it. Login actually, or the long tail pattern. Is it a white label? Is kind of things. I like actually also maybe the add-on, that is the cheap airlines. So if you do the cheapest, and then you get up to the, then you get actually in every search engine, you are on top. If the algorithm is find the cheapest, but then you ask actually for every additional thing, actually you ask additional fees, or the Aikido kind of turning the strength of all competitors actually to the upside down. So these are all kind of combinations. On the website here, Business Model Navigator is actually kind of, I think nearly everything of my book actually is there for free. So you could Google around. It's actually even better, because what you could see is actually which business model is actually combined with which empirically. So this is only empirical research, which means this, just for example, it's not true, has a combination with that and that. So these are typical patterns. For example, razor and blade, which is called after the razor are given pretty cheap, and then you have to buy for the blades very expensive, is combined with a login. Because if you don't have login, you cross-subsidize your competitor, right? And this is, by the way, very simple than what I did actually at Schindler at that time. When we sold high-rise elevators, we sold it for the cost base, but then we got actually into a service business, and the service business is highly attractive. So examples. So these are kind of generating the new ideas. After having that done, and here I could recommend that website, you go to building a consistency, which means internal consistency. Are those four questions actually internally, are they consistent with each other? Do they fit with the core competence, what you can do actually? And then external consistency means checking back actually to the change driver. Are we addressing the right business model? And often you need to adapt and change a lot. And in terms of the lean startup methodology, the startup, you need to adapt and learn quite a lot in that area. And here I also came with the fourth last thing, the implementation is actually testing. Most important, we say you have actually hypothesis assumptions, you test those assumptions, and you build actually a concept, and you rework that again, because instead of doing a lot of Excel sheets and a lot of calculations with business cases, we recommend stronger identify what are the basic assumptions, and formulate as a hypothesis, and check each with actually a very specific test. So to follow up, to speed up here a bit, it's kind of, we have a short checklist, what you could do that. And there's actually, the core is actually the business model. So that's actually the core thing. The new business model, and describe it in terms of the who, the what, the how, and the why. Describe that one. Then second, check out in terms of the what are actually the gains and pains. This goes back to Clayton Christensen. Check out actually what are the pain reliever and the gain creator, so the functionalities of the product. This is actually the product perspective. Think actually how you position yourself, because that is the competitor. and think what is the clear mission of your business model innovation, and check out, I buy our product instead of a competitor's product because of give a reason which is proven by please facts to that. And that is kind of all kind of the top, the beginning, the value proposition. Then you also have to check out actually the revenue model in terms of what is the revenue driver, the cost driver. Think of the competences in terms of what can you do for that business model. First, we can, and second, we need. And if we need, actually, we need to think also, who is the partner and what do I offer to him, to the partner? And the best is actually, if you think also the partner, to think actually in terms of the business model, you have to offer him something, and you have to think exactly actually the same. So it's kind of a reflection. And most important actually for all that is actually you have your assumptions, and for each assumption, and you actually have clearly also one test method. So having actually assumption, and please each try to test it. So this is kind of the worksheet, actually, what we try to, if you practically work on that, I always recommend think of the whole thing and not just going to the gains, not just going to the competencies. You often have to combine, you have to think of what can we do, what have we, and what can we do out of what we have. And now maybe times change. Maybe you have to rethink what can we do and whom do we need to do so. But then at the same time, think of don't forget of the customer. What are actually the real, the journey behind it? If I summarize, this is how to exceed the customer expectation. Where is the sweet spot? So where I can start actually with creating actually value. How can I outcompete my competitor? How do we create and capture value? How to leverage our competencies with partners, and how to accelerate our learning journey. And important is always, and I think you know that much better than we know that here, that we have to learn faster than we actually have to, then the environment is changing. And when the environment is changing a lot, I think we just have to always rework our assumptions and adapt to that. And I think that is actually extremely important. Yes, then there is always kind of resistance. If you take out the resistance, only 30% works. If you think why, it's employee resistance or also management behavior. Only 40% is lack of resources, but that is maybe not for you at the moment, but that is kind of the Western thing according to McKinsey, and McKinsey is doing that regularly. And I would say, if I summarize, 2/3 actually is management relevant. So management has to think about that. So if you lead a startup, actually do think so. In other words, think of, does it really work? But at the same time also try to get incentives and think how actually we can stimulate that one. And you get all your partner and employees actually on board. Very last thing is, it's not about the technology, it's the business model, which is the key. So technology is often a commodity, and the more and more actually we have kind of open AI and other things which is actually more and more open and available, I think it's most important to work on the business model. Start with the customer view and identify the gains and the pains. Think then of the business value in terms of really end to end. So where is the customer? What is the customer really having the gains, or what's the pain of the customer, and how can I solve it with my partner, with my competencies and my partner? And think about the partner, and think also much more outside in than I think that works. So I hope I could contribute a little bit to your discussion, and was able to summarize a bit. We have kind of books. The Connected Business is the very new book right now. It's a bit on the IoT. It's with this group CEO of Zülke together. We edited that book. It's kind of a bit between software and what platform business and business innovation. What could we do? Cybersecurity, stuff like that. It's kind of all what is needed to create value in a network economy. And this one is actually the one which is also in Russian available, Business Model Navigator. And here I also think to the website. thanks very much, and I am open for questions.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your presentation. I think we all agree that that is actually extremely urgent question. And it was very nice of you to share your thoughts and ideas in it with us. Yes, so now we invite everyone to ask your questions. Feel free.
And maybe write in the chat, which is the most easiest one, and then maybe
yes, so we can
discuss whatever you have questions or writing. So I have the chat open. Yeah, who's the icebreaker?
So maybe then the first question will be from my side. I wanted to ask you about how do you distinguish new patterns, business model patterns, how you get to know that something is going on which is different from what was before? Are those new patterns some kind of variations of previous ones, or are they mostly completely new and different?
Yeah. Thanks very much, Daria. That is one of the most often questions, and especially I would say in the first years when we got out the Business Model Navigator, there was often asked, by the way, this one is the second edition. It was last year nominated as for the International Business Book Award in the UK. So I think it's still relevant, but it's kind of already old. So old in terms of 9 years, it's already published. And I got at the beginning a lot of questions, have you forgotten one business model pattern? And I loved those comments. All over the world came comments, what is actually, you have forgotten something. And sometimes I could kind of recombine it. Sometimes it's also kind of a question how you fly. So we have, per definition, it was a decision to get around 50 business model patterns, because if we could have only 3, like my colleague Chris Todd did. It's a transaction-based, innovation-based, platform-based. That also works, but it doesn't help companies. And if you are on a very detailed level, then actually you have to say every unique company has its unique business model with its unique composition of resources and capabilities. So it's kind of a decision to say, well, we want to have something like 55. Today, now we raised up to 60 because I couldn't avoid it. But actually, it's a kind of a decision, what's the abstraction level? And often you can explain new business models actually with variations and combinations actually of the existing ones. So but it's not a too mathematical model. It's really, it was always thought of. So we do a lot of really kind of basic research and publish it very much in basic research journals. But this was really designed to apply, and that's why we did a kind of a decisions. And if you browse through the Business Model Navigator, also on the online website, actually you could see actually a few are quite similar. What is pay-per-use? What's performance-based contracting? My students
the flat rate and subscription. The flat rate and subscription.
Yes, also like that. Subscription, we thought of really like a newspaper, what you get actually and you pay, and a flat rate should be a one-time payment. But I agree, and there's a lot of kind of gray areas in between. So today, actually, there's a huge research stream. So I did 5 years ago, I did a presentation in New York and on the business model conference, the keynote, and I actually was astonished how many started actually with taxonomies and really doing research on new business model patterns. So it is there, but our aim was really to deliver a very practical approach to help business leaders and innovators to develop actually a business. So it's kind of, it's an overlap and it's a practical work, which is for me difficult. For to check my exams of my students. So we teach that in the master class, but also in the MBA and the executive MBA class. And it's kind of always, I try to avoid the gray areas so I have a clear answer. But there are gray areas, and sometimes you have rights. You could also argue there's no difference between flat rate and subscription rate. The way we wrote it in detail, there is a difference, but I would agree with you if you say, okay, it's kind of the same thing, and then I wouldn't distinguish kind of in between that.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, then Alexander, you agree with this statement that for any product or market, you can find an innovation, a business model that will make business successful. I very much believe so. So whenever there is something, I think you can find a business model to find a solution. Sometimes it's very hard. For example, I was once in the concrete business, which is really very heavy cost reduction driven business, a really old style business. And still you find something, you have to reconfigure. I think you have to dive very deep into the customers' solutions, then think maybe to the customers, and think in the supply chain, who's supplying you, who's the supplier of the supplier. So think broad. And I think it is everywhere it is possible. I don't say it always works. So I also have own startups and it doesn't work. It's not that I could say it works always. Sometimes, the market change or you have assumptions which are not right. But I would encourage really everybody to think in terms of business model, to start with the value creation part of the customer, with the pains and the gains, to address those, but then to think really in a holistic way and take those patterns as a stimulator to rethink actually today's business model. And today's business model means also select a certain industry and then rethink, like the Hilti thrilling hammer, right? It was not obvious and nobody thought about that. And Hilti was not even under pressure. They started it just slowly and drove into that. And today they have 50% of the world of their whole turnover worldwide actually done with fleet management. And these are highly loyal customers and who actually really appreciate actually also Hilti for their service orientation, but at the same time are very profitable for Hilti and actually create quite a strong loyalty. The other word for loyalty is login. Marketing people would say it's loyalty. I would say it's a login pattern. So it's kind of once you're in, you difficulty actually you have very high change costs actually to get out of it. And that is kind of interesting to look at such a business. What would be the most startups you think of are more IT based or more hardware oriented? What would you think, or service oriented? If I could simplify in terms of software IT, where I read about Odessa a little bit, hardware or service oriented, what would you think? Would you expect actually more?
I think it will be service oriented. But maybe this year we have many ideas with hardware startups from the students, from the business. Yes. I don't know why. Maybe it's because we have many problems with hardware this year.
Yes. Yeah, I think so, that this could be. Obviously, it's the easiest part with software as the service sector is actually more easy. And I think even in the IT sector. So I also would think of the IT sector, because once you have a stable and a stable infrastructure, this is something which is location independent. And I think that might be also interesting. Yeah, but I think the hardware is kind of a lot, and especially if I think of pre-financing. So I was last week in Singapore, and I talked to an entrepreneur who did actually affordable housing in the Philippines. And I talked to this entrepreneur, and he was got a lot of awards by the Prime Minister of Singapore, and was very interesting one actually. I put it on LinkedIn if you're interested. This small kind of the picture, affordable housing, and at the end is actually the business model. What he said is what he has to think of is the business model. So what he did is actually he built affordable houses and said, for not everybody can afford that. That means actually we put solar energy on the top. It's an integrated, a very interesting architecture. It's also kind of a very sustainable because it's also getting water independent. So it's kind of very autonomous building, has solar energy on the top, and actually get 25% of the whole financing of the people live there is actually going back via the electricity they pay. So they use their own electricity, but they produce more than they will need. And they actually do a payback actually via the electricity. And that is a very interesting kind of also, I found it very, very cool idea for especially now developing countries like Philippines, India, and Indonesia. These are the target markets. But he said he got a lot of requests also from developed countries, because the principal idea is very interesting to get a financing model, and this is a for-profit model. So it's not a. I mean, they're doing something good. It's a sustainable house. It's getting the solar energy. It has a sustainable with water and everything. It's getting very autark, and at the same time, it's affordable. So it's also very social. But it's a for-profit business, and he said normally you need 9 years. Then actually the thing is paid, and then actually the rest. Then it goes in the surplus. Now, problem is obviously risk. If you have an unstable environment, utility companies don't like to pre-invest if they don't know whether they get back the money. So it's a kind of, you need a stability there. That is the bottleneck there. But I found it very interesting during my last week's visit in Singapore, talking about that Brazilian that entrepreneur. So it's kind of, you know, even if you are on hardware and you need to rebuild infrastructure and things, I think this kind of thinking helps to make it more easy, because at the end, if financing is a bottleneck, we have to rethink how could we do that. And these are maybe also things what can be used. And he got a lot of requests also in developed countries. Yeah, from Raya, some comments about possible problems this company face with applying. So there are a few challenges. The first thing is, think abstract enough. So typically you always think in terms of product. What's the product we need to deliver? And you need to rethink a little bit on abstract. So with my example with affordable housing of this Singaporean entrepreneur, this award-winning entrepreneur is actually thinking not just about the house and build the house, about thinking about the revenue model. Revenue model means, yeah, there is something with the solar energy there. I have built something which creates actually more value than you could think of, and then rethink in terms of revenue streams. That means you could think of new customers who at the moment cannot afford to buy a house and build up and buy a house. That's why, you know, think about the new target group, and also think about the value proposition for them. It's kind of a community, and he even made it even fancier. There's kind of an app there with neighborhood housing, and kind of even a smart home, a mini smart home. So it's a lot of things, but it's actually included with a lot of costs. So it's still a very low cost affordable housing. But you have to think of that, and then thinking, you know, in terms of the supply chain, who would partner with that? Maybe it's a venture capital, yes, one thing. Then there is a little bit developing money, you know, what you could get if you develop actually a region, underdeveloped region. But then there's also a utility company who also did 20% if they do the risk. And if they do not maybe 20%, maybe if they are risk averse because they don't believe you that the money goes back after such a long period, then maybe you have to make it more attractive, then maybe you have to decrease that is kind of in 6 years it's paid, and then maybe 6 years it's paid. You could say, okay, maybe I have a default, but I still have 25 years of life what I can do. So after the first 6 years I survived, I actually get a break even, and that's kind of playing around, and I think we have to think of that one. So think abstract enough and don't think in terms of product. That's the first thing. Second thing is really make your most crucial assumptions explicit. That's what I learned also from Google. Kind of they should try to make it your most critical points. And that's, I think, important for every startup. The most critical assumption, make that explicit and try how to test it as cheap and as fast as possible. And normally we often test what's just easy to test instead of what is most important to test, right? We walk because it's nice to walk and to show some progress, but we shouldn't go for showing some progress. We should fight for the hardest problem and the hardest assumption first. And that is in a business model innovation often is seduced to just show some progress, and especially students often show progress. But it's not about showing progress, it's about fighting the hardest. And that's why if you think I put those assumptions in terms of how could I kill my own business model, then it's actually very helpful if you try to kill your own business model and do so. Did that answer a little bit, Raya?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Yeah. If you have no other questions, I have 10 minutes more before I have to jump. But yes, it was very thanks very much for your attention, and I hope you could use some of the things. I actually really looked in even about, you know, what is the core business, what Ukraine is in, and think of obviously about oil and machine and cars, what you import, and about the export, about this sun oil and the weeds. But I didn't came up with a solution like that. I think you have to break and have to think of startups has to be tech-based and have to be innovative in terms of business model. And I think this is a chance also to get away from pure raw material towards actually really a greater vision and actually more value integrated, because a lot of value you could do independent of location. It's like IT services, a lot is actually location independent. And that's why I think there's a lot of things. I also learned a few startups which had the origin in Ukraine, but became very successful. Also the blockchain, I'm not so convinced about blockchain, but there are kind of ways, where we could do a lot actually if we have the right idea. And and I wish you a lot of success in doing so and implementing so.
Thank you very much, Professor Gassmann, for the knowledge and for the discussion. It was a great pleasure. We hope to meet you in peaceful Ukraine.
That was our promise. What we did at Weidmann, we wanted this year was Ukraine. Actually, on my first visit to Ukraine would that be on Malyn. I'm since 4 years on the board, and we had on a lot of different locations that would be Ukraine. And we said, promise as soon as the first thing is over. No matter how long we travel to Ukraine, how difficult it gets, we will be there, and very much.
We hope.
Cross my fingers for you.
We hope very much.
We are waiting you.
Yes. So thank you very much, and thanks to everyone who found the opportunity to attend today's event in such difficult circumstances. Thank you, everybody, and see you in Startup University. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks very much.
It was a pleasure.
Everybody of you. Take care.
Oliver, thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye, thanks.
Goodbye, good luck.